Now, we were meant to have Dr. Mary Foley, who is the Managing Director of Telstra Health, with us today, but unfortunately she's had to send her apologies at the last minute. But we are in good hands because she has sent along Dr. Phuong Pham. Please make welcome Dr. Phuong Pham. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I'm very, very pleased to be able to speak today at this session on health and digital disruption. As Daniel said, unfortunately, I do have to apologise for Mary Foley as Managing Director of Telstra Health. Unfortunately, she's unable to be here today because of some urgent matters that had arisen. But the speech that I'm about to give today very much reflects some of the key themes that she would have spoken about had she been able to attend. In talking about the digitisation of healthcare, I want to cover three key themes. Firstly, what the wider trends and challenges in health that are transforming the healthcare system are. Second, what these challenges mean for how healthcare is digitising. And third, some practical examples of how new digital health solutions are being deployed to help personalised care. Before focusing on the impact of digitisation on our healthcare system, I want to begin by providing some broader context of how some of the major trends that are occurring that are affecting healthcare. These are trends that are driving why personalisation of care is important, and they are trends that are also shaping how the healthcare system is digitising and which digital health solutions are being adopted. If you look at what has happened in healthcare over the last 50 years, we have made many tremendous advances. We are living longer than ever before. Many diseases that weren't able to be cured are now treatable and manageable. Many cancers can be treated or managed as long-term conditions. Instead of resulting in a heart attack, conditions like heart disease can be effectively managed, particularly through ongoing medications. These dramatic advances mean that the health system is facing new challenges. By the middle of this century, nearly a quarter of our population will be over 65. Over half of the population has at least one chronic disease, and in 2011, 2/3 of the burden of disease was due to chronic diseases. These changes mean that, instead of dealing with short, acute illnesses, our health system now needs to manage long-term conditions, diseases of old age, and chronic conditions such as diabetes. And these conditions require a profoundly different response from the health system. Firstly, these conditions aren't cured through a one-off time-limited intervention. Diseases like diabetes or Alzheimer's can't be cured through a surgical procedure or a single episode of care. Rather, they involve care on an ongoing basis to manage the patient's condition and prevent it deteriorating. They involve monitoring a patient's condition over time and, ideally, anticipating and preventing that condition worsening. This means that planning, managing, and tracking a patient's care over time is critical. Second, chronic conditions cannot be cured by a single healthcare provider. Managing a chronic disease such as diabetes involves managing a wide range of factors, including the patient's physical and mental health, their lifestyle, diet, medications, and consideration of issues such as patient motivation and adherence. This requires the involvement of a care team of multiple providers. These could include the patient's GP, community nurses, dietitians, mental health providers, allied health providers such as physiotherapists, and specialists. It involves patients receiving care from these different providers both in the community and hospital. And the involvement of a team results in a need to ensure that different members of the team have a shared understanding of a patient's treatment. The team need to share information and be aligned and coordinated in their activities. Third, the condition stays with the patient. It is not resolved at the end of a care episode or when a patient leaves a formal care setting, such as a hospital or a doctor's surgery. This means how a patient manages their own care at home becomes among the most critical elements of care. Healthcare is no longer simply about what your doctor can do for you. It becomes about what you, as the patient, can do to manage your care yourself. So in summary, population ageing and the rise of chronic disease create three key challenges for the healthcare system. How do you manage care over time and anticipate and prevent a patient's condition deteriorating? How do you better connect a care team around the patient and share information? And how do you better involve the patient in managing their own care? These challenges mean that our health system needs to be reoriented to focus on more integrated patient-centred care. The past 50 years have seen the health system become more and more specialised in order to combat specific diseases, and it has become very, very successful in doing that. But the challenges we now face require us to develop better ways to connect and integrate this complex system around the patient. So if you look across Australia today, multiple governments are looking at ways to provide more integrated patient-centred care. For example, in New South Wales, the government has committed $180 million over 6 years to its integrated care strategy. This strategy is being delivered through 3 integrated care demonstrator sites, as well as innovator initiatives across all local health districts. Their role is to demonstrate how local services can be better joined up across different settings and sectors, including primary care, public health, not-for-profits and private sector, to provide better coordinated care for patients. In Victoria, the HealthLinks program is being implemented in multiple different health services, with a focus on integrating care for patients at high risk of repeated admissions to hospital. Eligible patients are identified by the Victorian Department of Health through a risk stratification algorithm, and each health service provides a model of care for better managing this cohort of patients in the community. For example, in Western Health, which is a hospital in the western suburbs of Melbourne, this model includes providing a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week point of contact and health navigation service and priority response assessment service. This service, supported via telehealth, better coordinates the patient's care across different settings and provides a fast response when their condition deteriorates. Gluing this together, real-time patient information is provided to the patient, their family and GP through a secure online portal. And at a national level, the Healthcare Homes program is trialling integrated care models across 200 general practices in 10 primary health network locations across Australia. General practices are being provided an amount of funding per patient, which can be used flexibly to meet the needs of the patient's care. GPs are expected to use electronic care planning tools to proactively plan and manage the care of a patient in collaboration with the patient's broader care team. The flexible funding model enables innovative care models to be used, such as telehealth and remote patient monitoring, so as to provide better care for patients in the community and outside formal care settings. A common thread across all these different examples is the central role of digital health technologies in supporting integrated, personalised care. In these efforts to better integrate care, digital health has a key role to play in the transformation of care so that it is centred around the patient. Digital health can help with each of these 3 challenges I spoke about in managing population ageing and chronic disease. Digital health can enable a patient's condition to be monitored and managed over time while they are at home and outside of formal care settings. Digital health is also essential to sharing information effectively across a patient's care team and supporting better coordination and collaboration across the team. And digital health technologies can help bring care to the patient through technologies such as telehealth and enable the patient to be more empowered in managing their care. While digital health has a critical role to play in integrating and personalising care, it's important to understand how digital health can play that role. Some people have hoped that there might be a single killer app or a single solution that can solve the problems of the health system and bring health services together. Some have hoped that there might be an Uber for health, a single app that can completely transform the sector. But this, in my view, is a misguided view. In other complex sectors that have digitised, say banking, it would be absurd to suggest that a single killer app can or should unify all financial institutions. And health is in many ways a much more complex system than banking. Health involves the interaction of many highly sophisticated and complex technologies and many different types of professions. And it's implausible to suggest that all these different technologies and needs can be replaced by a single app or platform. So if you look at sectors where digitising has involved connecting different parts of the sector, say making a payment across different banks, this is done within a framework where different systems are able to talk to each other. That is to say, different systems talk to each other through common standards and interoperability. Similarly, in health, the pathway to a better integrated, personalised system depends not on eliminating different systems, but on enabling multiple different systems across the sector to talk to one another. So in our perspective, there are 3 stages to this transformation of the health sector through digital health. The first stage of this transformation is the digitisation of healthcare providers through the creation of electronic, clinical and related records. This means the adoption of digital systems by providers such as GPs, pharmacies, hospitals, allied health and aged and community care. It's an area where in Australia we have made tremendous progress in many settings. For example, our GPs and pharmacies are very highly digitised, and many, though not all of our major hospitals, have sophisticated electronic medical record systems. But there is still work for a wider range of providers to become digitised. For example, there are significant opportunities for private hospitals to become more digitised. Much of Telstra Health's work is focused on providing these core digital systems for healthcare providers. For example, through our subsidiary Fred IT Group, we provide the leading pharmacy dispensing and point-of-sale systems, which are used by the majority of community pharmacies across Australia. We provide the leading clinical and medication management systems for residential aged care providers. We provide electronic medical records, administrative and patient flow systems to more than 100 public and private hospitals, and we provide the leading practice software to Indigenous health services across Australia. The second stage of the transformation, and this goes up to the second level of the pyramid that's on the screen right now, is through the creation of a common health record centred on the patient. Nationally, across Australia, we are at an exciting moment where we are about to take significant steps forward in achieving this patient-centred record. The national commitment to an opt-out record, a model for My Health Record, which is going to be implemented in 2018, will be a significant beachhead for digital health in Australia. And the third stage of transformation is through the creation of systems that enable personalised care for patients. This means the creation of platforms that connect clinicians and other healthcare providers around the needs of the patient. It means enabling the care team to provide collaborative care that is tailored to the patient's needs. This is an emerging but exciting area for digital health. It means going beyond our traditional products, which provide a single system for a particular healthcare provider. It means creating new platform products which connect providers to each other and, even more importantly, to the patient. I'd like, with the remaining time in my session, to highlight some practical examples of new platforms that support personalised, integrated care for patients. These are emerging technologies that go beyond a single application being used by a single provider, but they are exciting steps forward to supporting a more integrated health system that provides personalised care to patients. The first example I'd like to highlight is the creation of a connected consumer health app. Creating a more patient-focused health system is something that most of us in healthcare are committed to supporting. And increasing consumer control of healthcare is not simply something that is requested by consumers, it is a necessary response to the chronic disease challenges of the 21st century. As I have outlined earlier in the speech, one of the distinguishing factors of chronic disease challenge is that it does not cease at the end of a patient's formal care episode through definitive care. Rather, diseases like diabetes and heart disease are something that the patient lives with and manages through their day-to-day life, at home and in their community. In this context, enabling patients to better manage their own care is an essential strategy. In Telstra Health, we have created a connected consumer health app, which we call Health Now, which will support patients to better manage their care. Our vision for our consumer health app involves multiple elements. Firstly, it enables patients to manage their health information in one place. In particular, it is one of currently 4 consumer apps approved to integrate to the My Health Record, enabling consumers to access and view their key health information. We also envisage it enabling patients to manage their other information, such as their prescriptions, and accessing the results of diagnostic tests. Second, Health Now enables patients to manage their health services. This means, for example, managing appointments and receiving reminders. In a pilot that we were developing with Barwon Health in Victoria, we are working on how information and reminders for outpatient appointments, for example, can be managed through Health Now. Thirdly, our consumer health app will support patients to better manage their own conditions. This means enabling a patient to monitor their own condition through recording vital signs, such as blood sugar levels, and connecting to devices such as blood pressure monitors. And it will mean guiding and prompting patients on how to manage their condition, such as through reminders on when to take medications. It's important to understand that this isn't about a single app that magically transforms healthcare on its own. Rather, it's about a platform that connects together multiple different systems and orients them around the patient. We believe that these capabilities will help patients take greater control of their own care and better manage their health information and conditions. A second area that I would like to highlight is with medications management. As many of you would know, medications are one of the key ways to help manage chronic conditions, and it is common for older chronic patients to be on, for example, 6 or 7 prescription medications. Few of us here would be good at accurately remembering that number of medications and accurately conveying that information to our healthcare providers. This is why the potential for medication errors is a key source of risk in the health system for patients with chronic conditions, and a critical area for digital health to address. To help address this issue, Telstra Health, through our subsidiary, Fred IT Group, has developed MedView, a medications management platform that enables the creation of a consolidated list of a patient's current medications. MedView draws from multiple medication information sources, including GP and pharmacy data. It enables authorised healthcare providers at key transition points to view this data and curate it into a reconciled medication list, which can also be verified with additional information from the patient. For example, an elderly patient might present to an emergency department, and MedView enables the hospital pharmacist to see the different medicines that patient is on. This reconciling medication list enables the patient's healthcare provider to have an informed view of the patient's current medications and can be written back to My Health Record. It enables the patient's care team to have a common shared view of the patient's current medications, reducing the risk of medication errors. And so MedView itself is currently in trial with Peninsula Health in Frankston in Victoria. Telehealth is a third area which I would like to highlight, where we are deploying new platforms that better personalised care. A case study of how telehealth can be used to provide more patient-centred, effective care was for Mackay Health and Hospital Service in northern Queensland. Mackay's challenge was that demand for outpatient services exceeded the local availability of clinicians. They found it very difficult to find the right kinds of specialists to meet the needs of their patients in their community. This led to long waiting times, with average waiting times of up to 15 months and sometimes up to 4.5 years. This also included clinical risk for patients and obviously could lead to poor outcomes for those patients and prevented the hospital from meeting their waiting list targets. Flying additional specialists to the hospital for a limited time is expensive due to the cost and time of travel and the high rate of do not attends. Limited access to clinicians meant that patients needed to be transferred to other hubs where necessary, with Mackay Health and Hospital Service required to cover the cost of the patient's travel expenses. The solution to this problem was to provide Mackay Health and Hospital Service with a video conferencing telehealth platform and service. This platform enabled outpatient consultations, where clinically appropriate, to be undertaken via telehealth, with specialists who were able to be sourced from other locations across Australia. Importantly, providing the telehealth platform was not simply about providing a technical solution. It also provided the wraparound services that enable a telehealth consultation to occur efficiently. These wraparound services include services to source specialists from around Australia. They include reminders to the patient before the telehealth consultation. They include a virtual clinic receptionist to schedule appointments and ensure that patients are ready for the consultation. And it includes also electronic clinical information systems to ensure that the clinician has the right information about the patient for the consultation. So you can see from this example how a whole range of different digital health technologies need to combine together to make something effective for the patient and the specialists in terms of delivering better care. The outcomes of this work with Mackay Health and Hospital Service have been substantial improvements in patient care. Average waiting times have been reduced from an average of 15 months to 3 weeks. The telehealth clinic experienced 0 do not attends, compared to an average of 15 to 20% for face-to-face outpatient services. And access to the video platform was quick and simple, with high-quality audio and visual, meaning that all participants could see and hear clearly. In addition, Telstra's video conferencing solution has the capacity to auto-modulate in areas with variable bandwidth, so audio connections are still possible if bandwidth is limited, rather than losing clear connectivity altogether. In summary then, each of the 3 examples I have just described show how digitisation is transforming healthcare and moving to creating a more patient-centred, personalised and integrated system. The Health Now app I described shows how technology can be used to provide patients with greater control of their health information and services. Importantly, it's not about a single killer app. Rather, it is about a digital platform that connects a whole range of applications and information systems around the patient. The MedView application I described demonstrates how clinical information can be better connected around the patient. This platform shares information between different healthcare providers. It reduces the risk of medication errors and improves the quality of care. Finally, the telehealth platform I described shows how care can be delivered in different ways, improving access to care by bringing care to the patient. In conclusion then, we are at a challenging but exciting time for health and digital health in Australia. It's a challenging moment because the issues we need to manage in the future are not the same as the challenges we have so successfully managed in the recent past. Instead of curing single one-off diseases, we need to manage ongoing conditions. We need to cope with the increasing burden of chronic disease and an ageing population. Our health system will need to work differently. Specialisation and subspecialisation have successfully enabled us to address many health challenges and episodic illnesses. But we now need to work in a more integrated, patient-centred way to address our future needs. But it's also an exciting moment because so many of the pieces are being put together that help address these challenges. As I've outlined, at both national and state levels, important reforms are taking place that will help provide the structural and funding arrangements to more effectively support integrated care. And we are on the path to implementing the digital health initiatives that will connect care around the patient. Our healthcare providers and organisations are well on the way to being highly digitised, particularly in key sectors such as general practice and pharmacy. the key foundation stones are being laid to create a common health record centred on the patient. And, as I have outlined in this speech, exciting platforms are now emerging that integrate and personalise care for the patient and better connect their healthcare team. It's an exciting future that we can all look forward to and that will provide better care for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Phuong. I'm going to have to give you the number of my GP practice because they're not digitised at all. So the question on my mind, and possibly on the minds of a number of people in this room, is why is Telstra getting into health? Shouldn't you be, aren't you a phone and internet company? Shouldn't you be just doing that well?
And this actually relates back to some of the points that were made by some of the earlier speakers. Like many telecommunication companies around the world, Telstra is in the position of going through a whole transformation which is occurring with the convergence of telecommunications and technology. So essentially, Telstra is moving from being a telecommunications company to becoming a digital and technology company. And so health is one of the biggest sectors in the Australian economy. It's one of the fastest growing parts of the economy. And so Telstra, as part of that process of becoming a digital technology company, saw that health was a good area to invest in.
Thank you. Now, we do have time for questions from the audience. Would anyone like to start with a question? While you're thinking, I would like to know, you're head of strategy. Yep. What are the key objectives of your strategy for Telstra Health? Is that something you can share?
So there are certainly some elements of that we can certainly share. So really there are a couple of different elements to that strategy. First of which is our core business is focused on providing those core clinical information systems for healthcare providers. So things like pharmacies, hospitals, GPs, aged care and community care. So a key part of our strategy is, first off, is helping for more of those providers to be digitised. So there are some areas where there's already very high levels of digitisation, so things like pharmacy and GPs, although perhaps not your GP, they're very highly digitised. But there are other parts of the sector where there's still some progress to be made. So things like, especially smaller hospitals or private hospitals, those sorts of areas of the sector. So a key part of our strategy is how do you encourage and enable that whole range of healthcare providers to become more digitised. But then the second part of our strategy is, once you've got those different parts of the health sector digitised in their own, as it were, in their own silos, the key challenge then is how do you better connect across those different silos. So as I was saying earlier in my speech, one of the key challenges for health is how to operate as a much more connected, integrated system. So instead of being very focused on just one disease, fixing your broken leg or something like that, when you've got conditions like heart disease or chronic diseases like diabetes, things like that, it actually becomes much more about how do you connect your different care providers around the patient. And in order to do that, you need to connect the digital technologies that support those care providers. So that means, how do you connect information between different care providers? It means, how do you share information so that they can collaborate and coordinate well together? How do you provide the patient with greater control of that information and have a greater sense in how their care is being managed? And how do you bring that care to the patient in different ways? So if you've got a disease like diabetes and you're in the community, how do you bring care to that patient when they're at home? Or if you're an older person at home, how do you bring care to the person at home rather than waiting for that person to get ill and come to an emergency department? So those are the key parts of our strategy.
Fantastic. I was reminded of Stephen Shealer's comment of how Facebook pivoted to mobile at some point in their history, and I guess that's what I'm taking as something that Telstra's doing in terms of pivoting in some ways to health. That's quite a courageous move, and you talked about partnerships being a key part of the strategy. Can you tell us a little bit about the types of partners that you bring in and how you determine which organisations to partner with to bring this suite of integrated care to life?
So absolutely. So the way that we've approached engaging with the health sector has been quite different from how some other technologies have tried to enter the health sector before. So some of them have come from outside and tried to bring a big technology and say we can transform it from outside. The approach we've taken has been much more to focus on because we recognise that health is a very complex, sophisticated system, and there are lots of technologies that have actually grown up within the health sector, which you can't just toss them away. So what we've actually done is we've identified a whole range of essentially small to medium-sized companies which we think have interesting health technologies which we can bring together. And what we've tried to do, a particular feature of each of those companies has been that they're often things which have grown up in the sector and understand the needs of the customers and the providers in those sectors. So for example, the pharmacy company that the pharmacy software company we've invested in, the original founders of that were themselves pharmacists. And so they understood the needs of pharmacists, they understood how the complexities of that system, the risks as well, because risk is a key issue with health. It's not something where you can just easily fail and then say, oh, well, that doesn't really matter. It really does matter in health. If you don't want to make mistakes, you're here to improve the quality of care. So by bringing those what we've done is identified those different companies which we think have good, interesting, innovative technologies, and then we've highlighted them, basically acquired capabilities across the different parts of the health sector. And what we want to then do, and this is the second part of the strategy, is how do you bring those things together for connecting? So it's based on, as it were, being in partnership with the sector and understanding the needs of the sector and identifying products and services which have grown up with the sector, and then connecting across those and giving some of the scale that those individual companies might not have been able to provide in the past.
So it sounded like you had a vision for the kind of capabilities that you were looking for and then went out to the market to find those partners.
Yeah.
Are there any capabilities that you haven't yet found the right partner for, that you're still hunting?
Well, we're always open to further innovation and further capability development, and we continue to scan the market to look at what are the interesting innovations that occur, what are the interesting things that are coming up, the things that we should be, for example, there are a whole range of technologies that are emerging across a whole range of areas. For example, how care is delivered in the home, and so we always need to look out for those sorts of emerging technologies and work out whether there are ways that those should be better integrated.
Fabulous. Now, I've been getting some notice that there's a question over this side of the room. Would you like to ask your question now, please?
Michael Boyle from QUT. Perhaps as a counterpoint to that, not to be too crass, most of the minor digital innovations that have been in healthcare in the past have been driven by profitability, both for the provider and for the customer. So the money flows quicker once you make your payment. Both people get their money quicker. So what would be the motivator for Danielle's provider to move on to some of this, given that they've already got their customer, they've already got their profitability? What are you providing that's going to drive them towards that, outside of intrinsic motivation to have a better health outcome for the patient?
So one of the things that really orients us and focuses us as a part of Telstra, but as a digital health provider, is that we really believe in and think that the potential for digital health is about improving quality of care to patients. And this is one of the key motivators as well for healthcare providers. So we don't go to healthcare providers necessarily saying we're here to make lots of money, or we're here to, in a sense, focus on those commercial elements, because many of the people who work in healthcare, they're very bright, they're smart people. They didn't choose to go into investment banking. They chose to go to healthcare because they believe actually in making a difference for their patients. And digital health is one of the ways that you can actually help improve the quality and safety of care, because it's about things like, can you reduce the risk of medication errors? I had a colleague, for example, whose father was coming out of aged care, and they went through some of his medications, and they discovered he actually had 3 or 4 different medications 3 or 4 different prescriptions for a blood thinning medication. And if he actually took all of those medications which he'd been prescribed at once, that would probably have killed him. So you can see there's a very clear need here for better information. It's not a very sexy topic, but it's a very necessary topic about how to improve care for patients. Another part of how do you improve care to patients is how do you find better ways to connect to that patient. So for example, if patients are in remote areas or things like that, it can be very difficult for them to access care, and it often means that their condition will deteriorate before they get a chance to go to an emergency department or a doctor or things like that. So technologies like telehealth have a key role to play in actually being able to get care closer to the patient and providing better access to care. And we do believe in the intrinsic motivation of healthcare providers, that they are actually interested in how do you improve care for patients, and we're interested in ways that we can best support that.
And I might just add to that, I'm likely to be the reason why they will want to talk to Phuong, because I'm going to switch providers if they don't start being able to email me my blood test results, and instead of having to print them off and fax them, as one example. We've got a question on this side of the room.
Good morning, hello. My name is Dana Williamson. I'm with the Queensland Genomics Health Alliance. I'm interested, and I have a vested interest in asking this question, what you're doing to prepare for the truly disruptive nature of healthcare with genomics coming into clinical practice in the next few years, and the amount of data that's going to produce to guide patients' care from cradle to grave.
So there's, I suppose, a broad question here about what do we do with data in healthcare, and this is an area which I think there's a lot of potential, there's a lot of interest, there's a lot of very exciting developments occurring there. That said, with data in healthcare, there are a couple of things which are quite complex issues for us to deal with. The first of which is there are very complex and quite strong controls around how data can be used and shared within healthcare. And these rules have evolved over time, and they have an important function because many of us are much less prepared to share our health information with who knows what compared to sharing, say, Facebook information. So this means that the role of how you approach data in healthcare is quite different from the role of, say, being Facebook or something like that. The second part of this is as a health technology company is that we are very much, it's not our data. So one of the fundamental principles of our relationship with our providers and our patients is that what we do must be guided by what they wish to do with their data rather than what we might want to do with that data. So we need to be able to support whatever it is that healthcare providers and patients might wish to do with that data, but we are not in the business of trying to do monetizing it in other kinds of way or commercializing it in other kinds of ways. So we're not like some kinds of internet company who are very interested in mining that data and then selling it off to others. And that's a fundamental part of our approach because it's about the trust that exists between us and our customers. So in that context, what that means is that the way that we approach the use of data is very much what are the key ways that it can support and help healthcare providers to improve care. So it means that the ways that we use that data and that technology must be guided by what are the things that clinicians find useful. And they can vary from a whole range of spectrum, from things like genomic interventions and those sorts of things, to quite practical things about, for example, hospitals have a challenge about how do you predict demand in a hospital, and how do you predict when patients are going to be turning up? What's the level of staffing that you might need to have in a hospital in order to make sure that you can cover the kinds of patients that turn up? So there are a whole range of different uses for data across the system. What we are trying to be guided by is what are the particular uses that our customers are interested in, that are ones that help them solve their immediate problems, and there are ones that therefore they are prepared to invest in.
So would you rule out getting more into the way that gene mapping can solve problems that we have as patients, as customers in the future?
No, certainly I wouldn't rule that out at all. But what we need to do with this is to be guided by what our fundamental customers are interested in doing with that, rather than being guided by what sounds like a nice thing to do as a technology company, if that makes sense. Yep. It relates to some of the other themes that some of the earlier speakers spoke about, that you need to be guided not just by what technology can do, but actually what your customers are interested in.
Thank you. Question here at the front.
Thanks very much, Phuong. I'm Ross Young, Dean of QUT's Faculty of Health. One of the great advantages that Telstra brings to this equation is scale. Our current model of care and systems of care aren't scalable, and in fact, if we don't prevent chronic disease before it starts, the kind of healthcare system we have in Australia has no future. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about innovation in Telstra's activities and how you're focused on the prevention of disease, and particularly at a population level. And there's some interesting emerging business models that relate to technology in this regard as well. Just citing one example, the gamification of psychological skills building in areas like ADHD to improve executive function, to lower impulsivity, offers a financial return for the business, but it also offers a greater return for the system as a whole, predicated on future savings. So we need to shift our mindset from tertiary care that's highly expensive to more distributed resources that will prevent chronic disease. How do you see your role as a technology provider enhancing that future?
Yeah, so absolutely I agree with you that the needs of the future need to shift further away from from tertiary care back into primary care. Basically, we think that the role of technology for supporting that shift has multiple different elements to it. First of which is around how do you better identify patients for whom these kinds of intervention is necessary. So one of our companies, which is called Dr. Foster, is a data analytics company which does a lot of work in the UK. One of the things that it's very focused on at the moment is how do you better identify patients who are more likely to be at risk of hospitalisation or rehospitalisation. So they get a whole range of data about where patients have presented before, what types of diagnoses they might have had, what kinds of conditions they've been hospitalised for in the past, and also some quite interesting things like socio-economic data. So where the patient is actually where their patient actually lives is a very good indicator, particularly in Britain, which is a rather more stratified society, is a very good indication of their socio-economic status, but also then their risk of various other factors of health risk factors. And so they use this data to help better identify and predict which patients are more likely to be at risk of hospitalisation. And this enables the healthcare trusts in the UK to then start thinking about what are the right kinds of intervention that can be provided to that patient so that you can prevent them being hospitalised and instead provide them care in the community. So that's one part of it. A second part of it is around how do you provide that care in their community. So this could be things like telehealth services or things like remote patient monitoring. Some of the systems that we have at the moment are things like we have an application which connects, which can be used on any kind of mobile device, but also connects to Bluetooth devices such as blood glucometers and blood pressure cuffs, those sorts of things, and enables a patient to better monitor and manage their care while they're in the community. But the key question with these sorts of things is what's the model of care that you build around it that connects from the patient back to the healthcare provider. And so that's why things like those structural reforms I was talking about in terms of integrated care or in terms of healthcare homes are actually important, because you need to have the right kind of structural and funding models around the clinical care model so that it's actually efficient for the provider and effective for the provider to be monitoring the patient to be monitoring the care of the patient while they're in the community. If the funding models aren't right, then the incentives are wrong, and then it actually becomes in the incentive, it becomes in the interest of healthcare providers to have more patients rather than to help manage their care in the community. So you need to get both the clinical care model right, the funding model right, as well as the technology that supports those models.
Great. Do we have some other questions? Thank you.
Hi, Carl Cartwright from QUT. Got a question around the healthcare record, and in particular how blockchain technology would be used in that space, and what sort of partners do you need to actually develop a system like that?
So I'll say at the outset, I am not a technologist. I am, in fact, a public policy person by background. So I'm not necessarily au fait with all the different kinds of technology which might be used around authentication and all those sorts of things. But clearly, having good identity systems and authentication systems and ways to manage information securely are a key part of ensuring the security of healthcare records. In terms of where those sorts of consolidation of records is going, so the federal government is moving to an opt-out system for My Health Record, which is in a sense it's a summary record for patients oriented around the patient, which will provide from next year will be because it's an opt-out system, it will mean that essentially anybody who doesn't opt out, for most of them, which will probably be, according to trials so far, 98% of the population will probably be covered by the summary health record. So that will mean that actually you've got a very large proportion of the population actually covered by these kind of healthcare records. And that will be it's actually quite an exciting development in terms of getting the digitisation of healthcare much more advanced. So those sorts of things I think are really important steps forward. Obviously there's a whole range of technologies that need to support security around that, and I know that there are changes occurring within the government about how they're going to think about some of the authentication mechanisms and security mechanisms around that. As I'm not actually a technology person, I probably shouldn't start trying to talk about those because I'll then start making it up then.
Thank you. Thank you, Phuong. We've got a question from this side of the room.
Oh, hi, Judy Matthews from QUT. Phuong, thanks for a very interesting presentation about some new initiatives that are happening through telehealth. And I was very interested in your example of what was happening in Mackay, where you've actually trialled some of these processes. I like the things about the reminders for patients, because often that's one of the issues, they forget. But I'm wondering, do you have any more information about the actual customer feedback of what it was like to participate in such a process? I can understand reduced wait times are good, the systems were good, but how did the patients actually feel, and how did they describe that to you?
Yes. So we've actually had very, very good feedback from patients around telehealth services. Part of this is actually, and we've been supporting telehealth services both in primary care and also in specialists. Part of this is actually that in the context of doing a telehealth service, often it's very important actually for the clinician to be very clear about what they are talking to the patient about, and also to reflect back to the patient things that the patient has said to them. So because of the situation of being in telehealth, there's actually quite a strong impetus on both the provider and the patient to not take for granted the communication that's occurring. One of the issues that might occur in a more conventional situation is that people rely on non-verbal cues a lot, or just assume that people have understood what they have said. Well, actually what we find is that within a telehealth consultation, especially when it's got good protocols around it, is that it actually becomes very important for the clinician to say, have you understood what I've said? And the patient to repeat that back, and these sorts of things. And what we've actually found from that is that actually patients find that they actually are reporting back actually having a much better experience, or a very good experience, because they feel that their communication has occurred well between them and their clinician.
Excellent question. Can I ask for a show of hands of how many people in the room today knew that Telstra was in health, knew about Telstra Health? That's excellent. So,
that's quite a good number, I must say.
It's a proactive audience. Phuong, are there ways that we can participate in the apps and the platforms that you spoke about today?
So the Health Now app, which I spoke about, that's available in the Apple App Store at the moment. So you can all go and download that. It's not yet on iOS. It will be on iOS sometime in November. We just have to overcome some little hurdles there. It's, in a sense, it's a relatively early kind of release. There's a whole range of other functionality that will come in the future. That said, to get the best use out of it, you also need to enrol for a My Health record as well, because that's the key system that it also is integrating with. So if you actually have a MyGov account and enrol for a My Health record, then you'll get more of that functionality.
Mm-hmm. And for the skeptics in the room, why would you encourage us to sign up or to not unsubscribe from My Health record?
So this has, I think, been one of these almost like a chicken and egg problem in healthcare in Australia, that people have said, oh, I don't want to join because not enough people are there. Only if everybody else joins will I be there. And if everybody is waiting for everybody else to join, it's a bit like action on climate change or many other of these big issues facing society where you need everybody to be part of it for it to get the maximum value. And if you just wait for everybody else, then everybody ends up waiting for everybody else and nothing happens. And so there are a whole range of benefits from being involved in digital health and actually having consistent records about your medications. If you don't want to turn up in an emergency department and find out that actually they don't know what your allergies are, if you're unconscious or something like that and you get into trouble, all those sorts of things. So from the point of view of your own health and well-being, particularly as you get older and if you're on many medications, there are benefits to actually being engaged with these programs.
Well, everyone, please join me in thanking Dr. Pham for being with us today.